Hello, my name is Christian,
I'm Nathan.
and we used a jazz dataset and Markov chains to generate lo-fi music.
As our original data set, we chose to use jazz music, and then we looked for a corpus, and here was one, the modern jazz fake book. A fake book is a set of lead sheets. Here's an example. They have a simple melody, they have the chord progressions, and a good jazz musician can use this as a foundation and improvise over the chords, fill in melodies with their own chords and all that stuff. But we have basic lead sheets to work off of. As an example, here's a piece from the dataset, 1974 Blues. Depending on how much you like jazz, you may have enjoyed that playing. But you can see some of the interesting things about our corpus. One of them being that chord tones don't necessarily match up with a piece. Both these measures are using D7s, but the melodies have an F sharp here and an F there. And we have around 400 pieces of those. And also we have music XML files for each of them here. We were able to import the music XML files through this. For now, I kept the dataset loading at 10 just to make the demonstrations easier, but you can put this at like 500 or whatever the max length of the dataset is, and it works just fine. And then another tricky part was that we wanted to transpose them all to C major to make the Markov chain generation a lot easier, so that we didn't have to worry about things being in different keys, that we could standardize keys and basically standardize scale degrees. This gives us a lot more data to work with. For example, if we wanted to generate a C major song, we wouldn't be limited to only C major data. We wanted to pick which features were important to us because, of course, not everything in the music was. And so to make this for chords, first of all, we looked at their Roman numerals. Because everything is standardized to C, this is the same as looking at the chords pitch class. But we decided not to look at duration. We decided not to because we decided on one measure a chord anyways in 4/4. And we decided not to look at, say, sevenths or ninths because even though those are important, that really limits our sample size. Like treating C major triads versus seventh chords versus ninth chords as all different things really limits the sample size of the Markov chain. And we figured out a way to hash them, basically just use strings, but this allows for good Markov chain generation, as we've seen in class. Here's a method to just extract all these chords and durations, basically just iterates every chord symbol, hashes them using the methods above, and then adds them to the chords. It also does include some duration, but that was legacy code. Now for the melody, we wanted some slightly different info. We did want duration here because in the melody, we wanted notes to actually have different duration. And so first a hashing method just to hash a note and get the features we want. Then a method to pull all the notes and get them. Another feature we wanted was the current chord of the note being played. And this is important because for overall melody generation, for example, if we were in a tonic chord, then we wanted notes that were relevant to the tonic chord. And so in our feature extraction, we also extract this. We keep track of what Roman numeral we're at through this line. First, for chord generation, we want to generate a 4-chord progression which serves as the repeated base of our composition. And to do this, we need to make the Markov chain in the first place. Like in class, we get a list of all the hashed chords, and then we use windowed to iterate through successive triples of chords, using the first two as a key to our dictionary, and the third ends up being a value, but more so a value to a counter here. And so we use the first two chords to get the counter that we want, and then increment the counter as we need it to. And so using this on the small data set, here's an example that shows that after a 5 then 4 chord, there are 9 occurrences of that pattern. This is jazz, but these make sense, 5/4/5, 5/4/1 being quite common. Now to actually generate the chords, we simply crank through the Markov chain and get this to generate. First, we need to initialize. There's a lot of ways to do this, but our choice was just as a design decision to make them always start in C major or A minor, given that all the pieces have been transposed to those keys. It makes sense as a good start, start on the tonic. And then to actually generate the chords, like in class, we first make this initial progression. Then we just keep getting the last 2 chords that we've picked and dig up the collection that refers to the transition frequencies. and then use this to, weighted by the transition frequencies, pick the next chord and just keep going. There it is, keep appending. But then we want to make sure our chord progression makes sense if it looped, because it'd be jarring for, given a 4-chord progression, maybe the 4th chord, returning to that 1st chord makes music theoretically no sense at all. But that was the design decision of the music we decided to make. And so we impose looping structure. The way we do this is to keep generating a 4-chord progression in this case. That's actually 5 chords long, and wait until the first and last chord match, so that it's actually feasible from the data set that you would have that 4th chord go back to what ends up being the 1st chord. And as an example, I ran this Markov chain earlier. This gave me a 1, 2 minor, 5, 1 progression back to 1, which is pretty feasible. Other things it did, for example, given the data set, were like 1, 6 major, 2 major, 5, which given some of the pieces in the data set actually do make sense. It's jazz, it's weird. And then finally, for playback and score generation, we put them all in a part. This isn't too interesting, but basically given the chords and then given any specified beats or measures you want to put it in, just put it in the part. For example, we did here, and apologies for dark on dark background, but this is what the 1, 2, 5, 1 progression looks like, repeated for 8 measures. For melody generation, we again use a probabilistic approach to create a melody note by note. From our corpus, we can get all the notes. And then like before, we can create windows mapping triples of notes to their corresponding chord. However, it's not necessarily a Markov model, because we do want to enforce information about which chord is being played as these notes are being played. We can't have the Markov model generate a melody, under the assumption that there's a different chord being played. This chord, we believe, contains information. This does introduce a couple of problems. Namely, what if the triple that is generated at a time just doesn't have to exist in the dictionary? Then we do have to have some fallbacks. We look at all the potential notes that could be played with that chord being active and keep sampling from there in case it doesn't appear. But usually it does. We can just usually find the corresponding thing from the transition dictionary and then make our random choice. And to help with this, a lot of these top methods that I just scrolled over are helper methods that transfer our dictionary into a slightly different data representation. There's another method that gives us a random start, kind of similar to the chord progression methods, but nothing too interesting there. And yeah, as I said, we just randomly sample from the dictionary if needed. Otherwise, we take those two. We figure out the transition frequencies given the last 2 notes. We get the note, we get the offsets, and we just keep chunking along. For example, I did generate the full melody of 8 measures. Here, just the first 4 for pretty printing. And then we keep generating notes until we've reached the overall composition length that we want, as defined by length, as defined here. We do keep track of the offset. And here's just some methods to print those notes and to get them all inserted into a part. And here is what a sample melody ultimately looks like. For your enjoyment, Christian passed in that last version to a synthesizer, and